of how Christianity was in the founding fathers' documentations and so forth. And we said we could go on and on and on about those things. We've talked about a lot of different things. So if people who are offended by examples of Christianity and everything Christian want to cancel everything about Christianity in our society or in our nation, like taking, and I again, I'm not making a comment about Christmas being a time of year as a religious holiday, or celebrating the birth of Christ during this time of year. I'm not making that comment, but I am saying that at least people are thinking about Christ. That at least they have it on their mind, and to say, and they should, and to say, to take Christmas away and say Happy Holidays or whatever. Even though I think the timing is wrong, Jesus is the reason for the season. That's the whole point. In spite of the fact that we missed that, and I know the origins of the Christmas holiday. I understand it was a Catholic tradition to try to change a pagan holiday into a Christianized holiday. I got all that. I'm not trying to in any way promote that. I'm just saying that that's one way in which they're trying to take away the idea of Christianity, anything to do with Christianity. They want to take it off of everything and destroy it. But if they want to do that, they got a very big job, and they got a long way to go, because there are examples everywhere you go. Just quickly review some of the points that Brother Miller made in some of his lessons, and some of the things we tried to point out, that America is fighting a cultural war, and the central issue is God and the Bible. God and the Bible. That's the central issue. Are we going to allow God to be in our society? Are we going to allow public recognition of God? Are we going to allow public expression of Christianity in our society? That's the issue. And the Bible is the issue. Are we going to accept the Bible as God's Word? People don't want to go along with that. They want to take parts of it, they say, or they want to leave parts of it out, or they want to read it as they want to read it, or they want to say it's just a book like any other book. I saw, and I posted on Facebook when I saw this, a diagram, and I wish I could find it, a diagram that had all the different connections of the verses, and it was just a big bow with lines going everywhere of all the different connections from all the different passages and all the different verses from the Bible. This is an extraordinary book. 40 different men over 1,500 years, 3 different continents, different languages, different backgrounds, different histories, different ideas, everything that you can imagine that would make it different, but they have one unified message, all tied in together. Now, that doesn't in and of itself make it the Word of God. What I'm saying is it makes it worth considering. It makes it worth considering. But when you put into effect the idea of we've talked about this in the past, when you put into effect the idea of the prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. And I know there are those people who say that those prophecies were written in after Jesus came and added. The problem with that is the first translations of the Old Testament where those prophecies were written 200 years before Jesus was born. 200 years. So that's got to be kept in mind. There are over 300 prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. A mathematician, a non-believer, well, he used to be a non-believer, did the math on it. The possibility of that happening is 10 to the 300th plus power. That means 10 with 300 zeros behind it. It's impossible. Impossible that would happen. Here's the point. when we look at the Scriptures and when we look at what the Bible teaches and when we look at the passages that are there, there has to be an objective standard. If there's not, then anybody can believe anything they want to believe and do anything they want to do, and there's nothing to prevent that. Anything. You can do whatever you want to say. You make up your own rules as you go along. The passage in Joshua, or Judges rather, that is repeated in Judges, makes the point for us the best. In those days there was no king in the land, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. If we don't have an objective standard of truth, people can do whatever they want to do, anytime they want to do it, and they say, you can't tell me I can't do it because there's no standard. There's no objective standard of truth. Your truth, and they've gone so far as to saying it publicly, your truth is not the same as my truth. Well, truth is truth, y'all. It either is true or it isn't. There's no gray area there. It is objective, not subjective. And we need to keep that in mind. All right, anyway, that's the central issue. That's what we're fighting for. And these lessons that we're talking about are for the purpose of underpinning and building up our foundation, so when we face those people who want to attack us, we know what to say. We know what to do. Here's some examples. Proofs of the public expression of Christian religion by the founders and American society government documents, including the Declaration of Independence, the presidential proclamations, Pledge of Allegiance, presidential inaugural speeches, founding father quotations from the founding fathers, U.S. Constitution, Supreme Court cases, and state constitutions. Just a few of the things that we've talked about already. This spiritual war, even in our money, proclaims, in God we trust. And they're trying hard to take that off. They're saying that should not be, that is a violation of the Establishment Clause, that violates separation of church and state. Well, here's an example. Here it is, a quarter. In God we trust. It's right there. Salmon Chase, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, on November 20th, 1861, Salmon P. Chase, Secretary of the Treasury, addressed a letter to the Director of the Mint in Philadelphia, which said, "No nation can be strong except in the strength of God, or safe except in His defense. The trust of our people in God should be declared on our national coins. You will cause this device to be prepared without unnecessary delay, with a motto expressing in the fewest and tersest words possible this national recognition." From the federal government, 1861. What was going on in 1861? The American Civil War. Why? Well, if they still printed it, they don't print it anymore. Was it important in 1861, in the height of the beginning of the Civil War, was it important to state, "In God we trust"? Why? Because the country was falling apart. We were literally at war, brother with brother, neighbor with neighbor. There had to be something that we could tie ourselves to that would unite us again at some point. And Abraham Lincoln, among others, believed that which would tie us would be our faith in God. That's why they made it so important. On April 22nd, 1864, by act of Congress, the Secretary was authorized to place the motto, "In God we trust," on the 1864 2-cent coin. I didn't realize there had ever been a 2-cent coin. So when somebody says, "I'm going to put in my 2 cents worth," I guess this is where it comes from. This is where it comes from. The Constellation Nova Coppers. This was some coins from the 1780s. Just to let you know that didn't just start in 1860. These coins from 1780s, just after the Revolutionary War. If you'll look at them, let me go back. If you look closely at them, they have that symbol with the all-seeing eye in the middle, which was used by early framers to represent what? The all-seeing eye of God. That was a universally used symbol From the Freemasons, yes. Here it is on our United States $20 bill. In God we trust. That's one side. Look here on this gold dollar, 1864. In God we trust. So it was on our money. It still is on our money right now. They're trying real hard to remove it. Real hard. Unfortunately, for most people, or for many people, not most, for many people, the God that they're trusting in is the money. That's the problem. And because of that, they feel like if they have enough of it, they can tell anybody what they want to tell them, and you have to follow along with it. If you don't believe that, follow a couple of celebrities and see what they say about these kind of issues. And they think just because they have a lot of money and a lot of platform, they have in a big platform from celebrity, from their celebrity, that they can say and influence everybody else. In fact, now they even have a title for it: social influencers. That's what they are.
And that can be strong when you have that many followers.
Yes, it is. We even put "In God We Trust" on postage stamps in the past. Here it is, 8-cent postage stamps. That tells you how old that is. Been a long time since we had an 8-cent stamp. In God we trust, and notice this Lady Liberty that's there. Here's some other examples. If you want to completely remove Christianity and spirituality from our society, there's going to be a lot to remove. It's going to be tough. Give you a couple examples. Here in 1751, the Liberty Bell. Speaker of the Pennsylvania Assembly ordered a new bell for the State House. He asked that a Bible verse be placed on the bell. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof, from Leviticus 25 and 10. It was the official bell of Pennsylvania State House, now called Independence Hall, because that's where the Declaration of Independence was written. It rang many times for public announcements, but on July 8, 1776, it rang out to announce the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence, and that's when it cracked. Here it is. There's the date. And there's the verse, Leviticus 25:10, 1753. Engraved on the bell. So, one of the things you're going to have to remove, if you want to remove God and mention the Bible from society, you got to get rid of the Liberty Bell. You got to get rid of it. Don't let anybody see it. Or just take a grinder and go in there and grind it off, I guess. You could do that.
Or the council culture stuff that's trying to erase history.
There's a lot of cancel culture trying to erase history. And the problem with trying to erase history is, if you erase history, you don't learn from the mistakes of history. You're doomed to repeat it. It is why I've had kids ask me, why do you study history? And I've made that statement so many times through the years of teaching history. Because if you don't learn from it, you're doomed to repeat it. You need to learn from history. What happens when you do some of these things? What happens to society? What happens to nations? When you become so materialistic and so tied up in money and avarice and doing what you want to do, and morality goes away, what happened to the Roman Empire? Crumbled. It's going to happen. Every time. Statue of Liberty. This is a national monument on Ellis Island, New York. It was dedicated on October 28, 1886. This was given to us by the French for a celebration of our 100 years, our centennial. Proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all the inhabitants thereof is engraved on the Statue of Liberty, 25:10. Leviticus 25:10. Well, I guess we got to tear down the Statue of Liberty or chisel it off. How about the National Seal? This was in July 4, 1776, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson were given the task of creating a seal for the United States, a symbol, something that could be posted like a herald, a coat of arms.
That's three good ones to do it.
That's 3 good ones to do it. Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. The Constitutional Convention delegates believed an emblem and national coat of arms would be the evidence of a nation, independent nation, and a free people. So, with high aspirations for grand hopes for the future, the Great Seal was finally approved 6 years later on June 20th, 1782. The task was monumental, since the seal would reflect the beliefs and values that the Founding Fathers wanted to pass on to their descendants. This was what they wanted to do. The Founding Fathers wanted to pass on their beliefs and values to their descendants. Initial designs varied widely. Franklin and Jefferson proposed a design represented Moses crossing the Red Sea with Pharaoh in hot pursuit. It included the motto, rebellion to tyrants and obedience to God. Now, before I go any further, I want you to look at the 2 names of the people who proposed that. Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, 2 of the least religious of our Founding Fathers.
But that tells you where their minds live.
That tells you where their minds were at. Even they believed that we needed to have something with a biblical message of God is going to protect us from tyrants, like God protected Moses from Pharaoh and the children of Israel. That's the whole point of that idea, including rebellion to tyrants and obedience to God. Here was an initial design of the seal. It's hard for you to see. Rebellion to tyrants, obedience to God, and there it is. Moses crossing the Red Sea, and the Pharaoh and the Pharaoh's armies being drowned in the Red Sea. Who did that? God did. God's the one who did that. God parted the Red Sea. God let the children of Israel walk across on dry land, and God closed the Red Sea up over the Pharaoh's armies, the Egyptians. Biblical story. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, that's what we need to put up there. Interesting. Now the seal is a little different. In one, it's an eagle, you'll notice, with olive branches and arrows. In one claw, one talon, is an olive branch, while the other holds a bundle of 13 arrows. The olive branch and the arrows denote the power of peace and war. In other words, we're going to be ready to offer peace, but if you attack us, we're ready to fight. We're ready to fight. We'll defend ourselves. Why 13 arrows? Because there was 13 states at the time. The olive branch was, by the way, where did the symbol of an olive branch representing peace come from? From the Bible? From the Bible? Okay. Here's another one. This is the back of the seal, the national seal. Notice right in the middle, at the top of the pyramid, what do you see? The all-seeing eye of God. Annuit Septus, Novus Ordo Seclorum. Those are some things that mean, sometimes referred to as the spiritual side. It contains 13 steps in the pyramid, with the year 1776 in Roman numerals at the base. Why 13 steps? 13 colonies, 13 states. Notice the all-seeing eye, the providential eye of God, which was a regular, well-known, everybody knew what that symbol meant. And then the phrase, New Order of the Ages, the beginning of the American era, and the Secretary of State is the official custodian of the seal. New Order of the Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New Order for the Ages. Our republic was a new way of doing things. Annuit Septus, God is watching. So, we've talked about the Liberty Bell, the Statue of Liberty, National Seal. What are some other things we might look at? How about the United States Supreme Court building? The actual architecture of our buildings in the United States. Here's the Supreme Court building. There's some oak doors separating the courtroom from the central hallway of the Supreme Court, including a circular engraving on the lower section. Look at this circular engraving. What do you see? Ten Commandments. Now, Judge Moore was ordered to remove a statue of the Ten Commandments from the State House in the state of Alabama because it was a separation of church and state issue. The same people who told him to remove it has this on their doors. Interesting, isn't it? The support frame of the courtroom's bronze gates also bear the same emblem. Now, there are some people who say, well, that's not really the Ten Commandments. That's the Bill of Rights, the first 10 Amendments, the Bill of Rights. Then why is it on tables of stone?
Yeah,
Why is it on stone tablets? Everybody knew what that was. You can't twist it to make it not be that. All right, here's another thing in the Supreme Court. Moses with the Ten Commandments is inside the Supreme Court building. If you look at this, there's on the fresco out front, the frieze, located above the east entrance to the Supreme Court, there are 22 lawgivers, all pointing towards the middle. The three in the middle are Confucius, Solon, an Eastern lawgiver, and Moses. Where's Moses? In the middle. Here it is in the Library of Congress, another national building funded by public funds. Above the great arches of the main reading room of the Library of Congress is a statue named Religion, with the words Micah 6:8 above it. Engraved in the stone of this Library of Congress. One God, one law, one element, one far-off divine event to which the whole creation moves. That's a phrase from Tennyson, also in the Library of Congress. One God, one law. Who's God? Muhammad? Buddha? No. The one God Tennyson was talking about was the one true God. And again, not a particularly religious man, but he understood the society. Here's another one, North Hall of the Library of Congress. Here's a painting called Knowledge. Ignorance is the curse of God. Knowledge is the wing wherewith we fly to heaven. How you going to get to heaven? You got to have knowledge. What is the beginning of wisdom? The fear of God. That's what Proverbs says. U.S. District Court. Oh my goodness. Here's the U.S. District Courthouse. What is that? And the Ten Commandments. What is the U.S. District Court saying that our laws are founded on? Judeo-Christian beliefs.
If it's not, that's a lot of coincidences.
A lot of coincidences. Ronald Reagan building, which would not surprise you to know that Ronald Reagan would have been a believer and would have wanted his library to have this on it. The liberty of worship is a statue resting on, leaning on, what? Ten Commandments. That's the name of the statue, liberty of worship. What's liberty? Freedom. Freedom to worship. That's what we were praying about at the beginning of this class. The gratitude that we have the freedom to worship, and the prayer that God will continue to allow to have the freedom of worship, which they're trying desperately to take away from us. Desperately. John Adams' room in the White House. He had a prayer room. There's Abraham Lincoln This is the Adams, they call it the Adams mantle in the White House. Look at what it says. I pray heaven to bestow the blessings, the best of blessings on this house, and all that shall hereinafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. That was Adams's prayer. It's a good prayer. We've had a few honest and wise men. A few. Not a lot. Here's the National Archives. This is on the floor. This is engraved in the floor of the National Archives. Again, what is that? The Ten Commandments. How about the U.S. Capitol building? 23 marble relief portraits hang over the gallery doors of the House chamber depicting historical figures noted for their work in establishing the principles that underlie American law. They were installed when the chamber was remodeled in 1949-50. There are 23 mentioned, 11 face right, 11 face left, towards the middle. In the center of the north wall, all 22 look towards the full face of Moses.
That tells you how different everybody thought back in 1950 compared to now.
Again, what was going on in 1949-50 that would have made this important to state in such a dramatic fashion?
Rebuilding the country after World War II.
Rebuilding the country after World War II. The Cold War is going on with Russia. Russia was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was an atheistic, communist society that did not believe in God. We often referred to them as godless communists. Okay? That's what we said. And why did we think it was so important? By the way, who was president when this happened? No, it was after Truman had just left the office. Eisenhower. Eisenhower's the one that said we need to add the words under God to the pledge. Why? Because we have to distinguish ourselves from the communists. From the communists. In the U.S. Capitol, the Columbus or Rotunda doors. They stand imposingly in the main entrance to the Capitol. They were cast in 1860 in Munich, Germany. In 1871, they were moved to the central east front entrance and then moved to their present location in 1961. Notice the large lunette shows Columbus claiming San Salvador for Spain. Columbus is in the center. He raises his sword in the royal standard. What's behind him? A cross. It's a cross. If you can see it, it's on your left there. Well, it's in the center for me, my left. In the center, right behind him. Okay? In the rotunda of the United States Capitol, 58 feet above the floor, is a 360-degree painted panoramic frieze that depicts significant events in American history. 19 individual scenes on separate panels make up the fresco. Here's one of them, the baptism of Pocahontas by an Anglican minister in Jamestown, Virginia in 1613 or 14. The baptism occurred before her marriage to Englishman John Rolfe, who stands beside her, or behind rather, and the scene symbolizes the belief of Americans at the time that the Native Americans should accept Christianity. Admittedly, this was an Anglican church, but the point is, they were pointing to one of the most important events in American history was the baptism of a Native American. Here's another one. Protestant pilgrims are shown on the deck of the ship Speedwell as they depart for the New World from Haven, Holland on July 22nd, 1620. William Brewster, holding the Bible, and preacher John Robinson leads Governor Carver, William Bradford, Miles Standish, and their families in prayer. In prayer. Also in the U.S. Capitol, DeSoto's burial is depicted in the Mississippi River. What are they holding? Crosses. The Great Experiment Hall, Central East-West Corridor, chronicles 16 murals and legislative milestones of 3 centuries, from the signing of the Mayflower Compact in 1629 to the enactment of women's suffrage in 1920. 32 vignettes complementing the historical scenes are painted on the sides of the murals. Here's a few. The mural depicts from left to right Robert Livingston, Chancellor of the State of New York, administering the oath, Secretary of State Samuel Otis holding the Bible, George Washington with his hand on the Bible upraised, and Vice President John Adams taking the oath of office with his hand on the Bible. Here's another one shown from the right. Vice President Andrew Johnson, President Lincoln, Chief Justice Salmon P. Chase. Who is the Chief Justice? What's the Chief Justice holding? A Bible. Not a copy of the Constitution, a Bible. Here's another one. On the left, a preacher conducts an open-air service symbolizing the freedom of religion that is assured by the First Amendment of the Constitution. All this is in this series of paintings. Here's another one, stained glass. Window in the chapel of the U.S. Capitol. Washington praying. Praying. For in thee do I put my trust, is engraved in the stained glass. We got to take that out, y'all. Got to have separation of church and state. That's got to go. Matter of fact, why have we got a chapel in the Capitol?
With all that history, with everything that supports Christianity and the founding fathers and stuff, I don't see how they have an argument that, that wasn't on their mind. That wasn't,
They didn't believe in, no, it wasn't founded on Christian principles. That's right. Because it's like we read from Romans last week. When they knew God, they glorified him not God, but their foolish hearts were darkened. They choose not to believe in it. It's by choice. You can't argue with them. They won't hear it.
There's so much evidence.
Well, don't confuse me with the facts now. My mind's made up. A painting entitled Religion is in the U.S. Capitol. She got children, and what's that on her? She got a Bible in one hand, and what's that on her around her neck? Cross. In the House chamber, our current Speaker of the House, day one, pointed this out. This is in the chamber of the U.S. House of Representatives in the Capitol. Okay? Well, let me back up. You know what that says? I wished I could blow it up. I didn't have it blown up enough. That says, in God we trust. And they open the legislative sessions of Congress every time with a prayer. But I can't lead my kids in prayer at school because I'd be breaking the law.
So hypocritical.
What is wrong with this picture? We are ignoring our foundations. And if you know anything about building, if you ignore the foundations, what's going to happen to the building? It's going to collapse.
So, a question. So, when did the court cases come up to remove prayer out of school?
Started in the 1960s.
And so, how old are those people today who are elementary age?
The ones that were in elementary age in the 60s?
Yeah.
Well, one of them's 67.
So they're voting age. They're running the country.
They're running the country.
And what do we say is the beginning of wisdom?
The fear of God.
The fear and reverence of God.
Mm-hmm. It's
So
the
when
beginning
we
wisdom.
removed that teaching that everyone goes through in the public school system, and then they progressed, and then
Mhm.
their children weren't raised in it.
That's right.
So now we have the majority that were not raised with that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no belief in that.
Right.
And
So for those of you who couldn't hear, she's talking about these court cases that began taking it out were in the 1960s. So the people who were then in school age were, now in their 60s, and they are in 70s, and now they're dealing with the fact that an entire generation has been raised without that. An entire generation.
Wasn't it sometime in the early to mid '80s that they really started bringing the
Oh, yeah.
until, I'm going to say about the mid-80s is when there was a big upsplunge about it.
Well, there was a court case in the 11th Court Circuit, which is the one we're in, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia, that won several cases, but one in particular, where they questioned whether or not you could have prayer before ball games promoted by the school. And it was stated that you can't do that. Now, there's an exception. If it is done if it's not initiated by the school, you can do it. You can do it. We get away with it because nobody says anything about it.
Okay.
But if somebody says something about it, we could be in trouble. But I will tell you, like my principal at Jemison, when I was there, he put God Bless America on the sign out in front of the school, and somebody questioned about it. He said, I got to draw a line somewhere. He said, if they fire me, they fire me. At some point, we have to say, enough. I'm not going to stand by and let you tell me I can't believe in God. Yes, sir.
Just one small, while we're on this, oath of, to tell the truth in court,
Mm-hmm.
oath of office, every one of these.
Mm-hmm. We're going to get to those in just a minute. We're going to talk about some of those. Here's another example of the Lincoln Memorial. Lincoln's second inaugural address is engraved on the walls. And if you look there on his inaugural address, he talks about things like Christianity and God and how that we ought to be devoted to God and those kind of things in the inaugural address. It's engraved on the walls of the Lincoln Memorial. Here's an example. Each look for an easier triumph and result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible, talking about the division. The country's divided. We're in the middle of a civil war. We're at the end of a civil war. He's trying to reunite the people. Each believes in the same God, pray to the same God. Each evokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that men should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But let us not judge that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered, that neither of them has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs that offenses may come, but woe to that man by whom those offenses come. He's quoting Jesus. Folks, that's the President of the United States in his inaugural address saying we gotta accept God's will. And we're praying to God to fight against each other. Stop doing that. Pray that God would heal us. It was his point. It was his point.
If they try to remove religion from all our monuments and history, we won't have any history.
There'll be no way. They got to take this down. They got to take it down. Right. Here's another thing. It says. Let's see. I'm trying to find. Okay. The offenses came. Shall we discern there any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in the living God always ascribe to him? Finally, we do hope. Fervently do we pray that his mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn, the last shall be paid by another. In other words, if it's God's will that this war continues to do away with the scourge of slavery, then let it continue. Who's he depending on? God. God. We've got to take that out, though. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether, with malice towards none and charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God has given us to see the right. Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne battle, and for his widow and orphans, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. He says, let us, if God will be with us, let us end this war and bind our wounds and heal our nation. Engraved in stone. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is there, and I didn't go through the Gettysburg Address, but we went through it a few weeks back, and it's filled with allusions to God. Filled with it. Jefferson Memorial. Here's another one. God who gave us life, liberty, can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed the conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Commerce between master and slave is despotism. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than these people are to be free. Establish the law for educating the common people. Who is saying this? They're quoting Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was a slaveholder. He knew it was wrong. He didn't know what to do about it, but he knew it was wrong, and he knew the only answer to fix it was God. He knew that. I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just. What in the world does he mean? I tremble that God is just. Because he knows that God punishes the sin. He knew that punishment was coming. And for the country. This is written almost 80 years before the Civil War. And he saw it coming. He didn't know what to do about it, but he saw it coming. You got the Declaration of Independence in there, engraved in stone. Again, Declaration of Independence engraved in stone. 4 different allusions to the God of the Bible. Almighty God hath created mind free of all attempts to influence it by temporal punishments or burdens. It says burthens. That's the way they said it back then. Our departure from the plan of holy author of our religion. The holy author of our religion. No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship or ministry, or shall otherwise suffer on account of his beliefs.
He didn't say my religion, he said our.
Our religion. And who's the holy author? God. We could go on and on and on. We'll talk about some more of these memorials next week, but we're running out of time. But I want to get to, hopefully next week, we're going to get to the foundational problem that you brought up just a few minutes ago about the educational system and what's going on with the educational system. And we're going to talk about what it was supposed to be and what it has become. All right, thank y'all for y'all's attention.